So triggers are actually pretty cool because if you set them up properly, they will automatically execute and run code for you if you do inserts, updates, or deletes. So they are pretty good. They're often used for archive tables and for logs and that type of thing. So we're going to go ahead and key in task 3. And we're going to create a little table for testing purposes, which is kind of a good idea because you don't really want to wreck up your production data when you're testing out triggers. And triggers do run behind the scenes. So once you create them, they will automatically execute. So they are pretty cool. So we're going to do a little test table using Northwind database. We're going to have customer ID, company name, and country. We're going to throw those 3 columns into a new table called test customers. Okay, so I'm going to run this. Okay, I've got 91 rows of data now in my test customer table. And I'm going to comment out that code. And to practice our triggers, we're going to be inserting and deleting, that type of thing. So what we're going to do is create another table called customer log. And basically it's going to log the customer ID and the type of change that was made. So we're going to create this little table and it should go into Northwind because that is the database that is active and that is where we want it. So we're going to go ahead and execute. And now we have this little empty table. So at this point, we have a test customer table that we are going to be executing against. And for the changes that we make, they are going to be logged in the customer logs table. So the first trigger we are going to create is an insert trigger because our boss wants us to create a log every time data is added to a customer table. So we're going to create a trigger on our test customer table when we insert. And the trigger will actually run right after the insert executes. So this is kind of similar to procedures, views, and functions because we have create trigger. This is the name of our trigger. Test customers is our table underscore insert because that's what the trigger is looking for. This trigger is on our test customers table and it's going to run after insert. And then we have as. So below as is where all of the code goes that is going to be inserting into our customer log whenever there's an insert done on the test customer table. Okay, because up here is defining what the trigger is. The trigger is inserting on test customers. Okay, so when that happens, we have to tell it what we want it to do. And here's what we want it to do. We're going to set no count on just because this is supposed to run without people knowing that it's running. And I'm sure you guys have seen the count. Every time you execute something, it tells you how many rows were affected. Okay, so we are turning that off. If this is supposed to be running in the background without people knowing, we certainly don't want to show them that rows were affected. Okay, so we're turning that off. Then we're declaring the customer ID, and that is this ID here. And we're saying that the customer ID is going to equal the customer ID that was inserted. Okay, so customer ID that was inserted is basically referring to this one. Okay, this one that is inserted into this table. Okay, so our customer ID variable equals the one that was inserted. Okay, and you can see it says from inserted. So instead of a table name, it's saying from the data that you just inserted, take the customer ID and throw it into this variable. Okay, and then insert into customer log the value customer ID, which is the one that they just inserted that we are storing, along with a little comment of inserted. Okay, so that's the status. The customer ID is the actual ID that they had on the insert statement. Okay, so this is our trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and execute. Okay, and it successfully completed. So what that means is if I go into Northwind and I refresh, and I look in the programmability folder, and I look at my database triggers, hopefully if I refresh, I should eventually see it, but we're going to go ahead and assume it's there. And we're going to move this down. And we're going to run it. So we're going to do a couple of insert statements. And in order for this to execute, we have to insert into test customers. Okay, so I'm going to insert a couple of records or rows into test customers. And test customers had 3 columns: customer ID, company name, and country. And you can see I've got that filled in. They're all character. And basically after this insert, this trigger is going to run, and it's going to be adding this customer ID and inserted into the customer log table. And then after this one executes, it's going to add this customer ID and inserted to a second row in that table. So we're going to go ahead and execute this. Okay, so you can see the one row affected is referring to this was inserted and this was inserted. Okay, nobody knows that this trigger ran, okay, and that 2 rows were inserted here. Okay, you can only see that this row and this row was inserted. And I'm going to go ahead and move the comment down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything from customer logs. And you should see the 2 rows, okay, and that they were inserted. Now let's go ahead and move our closing comment down. So from now on, anytime anything is inserted into test customers, it's going to add to the logs. So our boss wants us to do basically the same thing that we did for inserts. It would like us to set this up for deletes and updates. Okay, so the exact same thing, but deletes and updates are what we want to add to our customer log table. So we can actually copy this. And instead of insert, now we are looking for a delete, and we want to update our test customers after delete. And this is all going to be coming from a deleted row. And so our customer ID then is going to be deleted .customer ID, okay, because it is keeping track temporarily of what you insert, what you delete, and what you update. And this is how you access it. Okay, and then for the status, obviously we want it to say deleted. So we've got create trigger. We're calling this one test customers delete. The trigger is on our test customer table, and it's going to run automatically after each deletion. And we've got no count on, so we aren't going to see a row count when this runs. And then we've got our customer ID, and we're grabbing the customer ID that was deleted, storing it, and then we are inserting that into the customer log. So we're inserting the ID and then the status of deleted. So let's run this. And we've now created this trigger. And let's move this down. And we're going to delete a couple of customers from our test customer table. And then we're going to display everything in our customer log, just so you can see that it does insert there for deletions. So we're going to delete from test customers where the ID is a root, and we're going to delete from test customers where the ID is lazy K. And then we're going to see the customer log, and we would expect 4 entries in there. Okay, so the messages over here is going to say that we've got 1 row affected from the delete there, 1 row affected from the delete here, and for our select, we have 4 rows. We didn't see any messages about the 2 rows that were inserted into customer log. And then if we come over and look at results, you can see that those 2 now have a status of deleted. So for update, it is going to be pretty similar to what we did for insert and delete. So let's just comment this out. Now, if we're going to allow them to update more than the customer ID, then we may want to change the status a little bit so that we can indicate what was updated. Okay, so this is going to be a little more complicated than what we did for insert and delete. It starts out kind of the same, okay, because we're going to create the trigger. And we're going to call it test customers update, still on the test customer table. After update is when we want it to run. And then we start out the trigger the same. We have no count on, and we still need customer ID here. Okay, so all of that is the same. But we need to know what they updated. So did they change the customer ID? Did they change the company name, or did they change the country? Those are the 3 columns that we have in test customer. So we're going to declare a second variable here, and we're going to call it action. And this is going to be variable character 50. Now for the customer ID, that is going to be the same as before. Okay, so we're just going to say select at, oops, of course you got to spell it right, at customer ID equal to inserted dot customer ID, and that is coming from inserted row. All right, so now we need to check for if they updated customer ID, company name, or country. And I should mention, in case you're wondering, why am I using inserted here? Because update and inserted both use the inserted row. It's weird, I know, but that's where they're storing the temporary data for inserts and updates. The temporary data for deletes is stored in deleted. Okay, so that's just how they've chosen to do it. Now, we're going to check the update temporary data, and we're going to see if customer ID was updated. So we have the data that was updated, which is stored in update. And we have to check the updated data to see if customer ID changed. So what this is saying is if customer ID was updated, if that's true, okay, then we have to tell it what to do. And what we want it to do is set the action variable to updated ID. That way we know what got changed. And we're going to say if update company name. So if that column got updated, that is true. Then we're going to set the action equal to updated company. And finally, if the update was on the country, then we're going to set the action equal to updated country. So now we have the customer ID that was updated. And I can see I need to be consistent here. No, I think that is correct. Inserted customer ID. Let me make sure. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So at this point, we have the customer ID from our update row, which is called inserted. And we've checked to see what exactly changed, and we're storing it. So now we're ready to insert into our customer log table. And we're going to do values. It's going to be at customer ID. And now we're going to do at action. And the action is going to be one of these three. And then we're going to have a little end here that goes with our begin. So that is the entire update trigger. And we're going to go ahead and run it. So that creates our trigger. And let's move our closing comment down. And then we're going to do a couple updates so we can get some entries into our customer log table. And we're going to update a couple different things. So we've got test customers is our table that we're changing. First, we're going to change the customer ID from Rollo to Rainby. And then we're going to change the company name from where the customer is equal now to Rainby to Taste the Rainbow. And then we're going to change the country for customer ABCWA to England. Okay, so we're changing country, company name, customer ID, and we're going to go ahead and run that. Okay, so we've changed 3 rows, and we're going to move our closing comment down. And now we're going to take a look at what's in our customer log table. Okay, so you can see our messages, updated ID, company, and country are displayed for the different customer IDs. And we're going to go ahead and move our closing comment down.